Hello, my friends. I hope you're all doing very well today. Social justice is dying, on YouTube at least. These are no longer the days where cultural Marxists and radical leftists can prattle on about their chains of oppression while sipping cups of Starbucks lattes and spending their leisure time using their iPhones to complain about capitalism. This isn't an argument that you can now safely ignore the far left and write them off as broken and beaten off into the hinterlands. Social justice as a movement and ideology still influences large amounts of institutional power from academia to Hollywood to government and nowadays even fucking elementary schools. The damages of the social justice wave is still being felt, and the rapacious practices it helped to promote, such as no-fault divorce, kangaroo courts for men accused of rape at college campuses, mass immigration, fractured race relations, and the deconstruction of the nuclear family, etc., etc., these are all still battles that must be fought, and will continue to be fought for quite some time. Nevertheless, if you've been following the social justice phenomenon as long as I have, or longer, and I started getting hip to it around mid 2014, it's undeniable that there's been a shift in the internet landscape in just the last few years, really the last 18 months. Breaking down and tearing down the arguments of far leftists and SJWs has lost its popular appeal. During Gamergate, when my long and still in process red pilling began, there were precious few channels and blogs and people just out there on the internet talking about the social justice phenomenon. A couple places in the manosphere here and there, some folks in the dissident right over there. To some degree, sure, you can point to a few rejected intellectuals who got thrown out of academia for making a politically incorrect suggestion or bringing up a hate fact. I'm not saying there was no one talking about it, but these were all niche corners of the internet that held little appeal to the popular culture. There was a limitation to the influence they could accumulate. They were too niche, too a bit out there. But then Gamergate happened, and to make a long and convoluted story short, popular culture, on the internet specifically, started becoming very critical of the far leftists and their beliefs. The SJWs overstepped their bounds and not only started, well, they had always been ruthlessly slandering and lying about everybody on the right, but then they started attacking their own ideological allies, classical liberals, to some extent even social democrats, and people like that. I'm not sure where exactly the turning point really began, when it became the hip thing to be against political correctness and social justice. I think Barron's channel was probably a bit of a watermark point because he came out of nowhere and just over a few, I think it was just a couple months, he suddenly jumped to 100,000 subscribers, whatever it was. Before then, you had a very difficult time getting a large following talking about SJWs. But let's move forward to the present now. There are very few indoctrinated automatons regurgitating their Marxist professors' talking points from the bedroom web cameras. Even Lacey Green is coming around, and Francesca Ramsey, of all people, has been forced to reconsider some of her positions. This is a bit of a problem for the people who've made the decision, typically during 2015 was the high point, to launch genuine careers as YouTube political and social commentators. I won't spend time exploring their thought process that led them to this decision, but nevertheless, there is now a significant cottage industry of social and political commentators, commonly referred to as the skeptic community. Some people get a little bit triggered and upset by that. I never really got it. Just because you can say you're part of a community doesn't necessarily mean you agree with everything everyone says, but that's neither here nor there. And a lot of these people, they're not academics or philosophers, and they're not even particularly deep thinkers. Mostly, they were just upset at being told what they can do and what they can say and what they can even joke about. But they also have bills to pay, you see. And that isn't a slight on any individual content creator's character or something. Like I'm trying to insinuate that everyone's just out there to make a quick buck complaining about feminists. Although there certainly are out there. I'd be lying if I said that there weren't any. But yeah, making on YouTubes is perfectly fine to do for a living if you can manage it. But I bring up the financial incentive and provide it as evidence for my prediction of the next phase in the culture war, which is the point of this probably short video that I want to make. Because regardless of what many of these folks might individually think, money will incentivize them to look for further material for their videos so that they can continue on as they've been doing, presumably in the same manner. This is my perhaps unnecessarily long preamble to discussing the recent debacle and controversy over Rage After Storm's recent video talking about human biodiversity titled Race is Real. Uh, I must admit I have not watched the full video because it has since been taken down. However, I have seen a few clips of it here and there from people responding to it. Some people had some clips on Twitter that they were sharing. Now, now that being said, I think from what I've seen, she presented her arguments not particularly well. But nevertheless, it is true that there are indeed behavioral and IQ differences between different racial groups, and it's an uncomfortable topic. I get it. I'm sorry that your parents lied to you. You know, they adopted the religion of big E egalitarianism and multiculturalism in exchange for reason. Most of what you've heard from your teachers about why some groups of people in the world do better than others, it's not all just colonialism. It's not all just historic white supremacy. It's not all Jim Crow. You can't separate a species for tens of thousands of years in vastly different environments and expect them all to have the same traits. And it's quite logical to have the position that, well, the brain is just as susceptible to the pressures of natural selection as the liver, and you're going to see some variance there, some diversity. You know, hey, we're all diverse. That's true. There is diversity in the world. But this isn't a video to argue necessarily for that. That's probably something else. But many people in the generally classical liberal and alt-centrist and right-wing liberal or conservative, as they're commonly referred to, skeptic community, took severe umbrage for this. Many calling her a neo-Nazi, an alt-right, and a white nationalist, a white supremacist. I have no idea if she identifies with any of these positions. I don't think she does. I know she's talked to a few alt-right people before. She's talked to Tara McCarthy, and I'm pretty sure she was on Red Ice Radio. Don't quote me on that. So she certainly talked to people on the alt-right. I don't know if she actually considers herself part of their movement. But the big objection that everyone's talking about is the fact that she used Stormfront as evidence for this position. Rage later said that she put the link in as a joke. Frankly, that's just bullshit. I'm sorry, people. I'm not buying that at all, and I think you shouldn't. You shouldn't either. I don't know Rage personally. I don't know what her character is. I can't speak on that. But I know bullshit when I see it. And that's just obvious backtracking after she experienced the blowback for her video. Her claiming it's a joke is nothing more than a last admitted attempt to save face, which is unfortunate. I would have suggested that she either, defend her choice of sourcing the Daily Stormer or Stormfront. It was Stormfront. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Stormfront. I always get the two confused. Um, Neo-Nazis out there, man, pick more creative website names. Storm something. It's all been taken. You're just getting yourself confused. You're getting yourself confused and conflated with other people. But yeah, I would have had a bit more respect for her if she had defended her position. Like, okay, you think Stormfront is a legitimate source of information? Then okay, man. Then support yourself. Don't just throw it out there and claim it's a joke when people get mad at it. Or pull a mea culpa and say, okay, I was wrong. My bad. I shouldn't have used that. I'll try better next time. I'll be more careful about where I get my information. So yeah, that's That's probably what I'm annoyed, so to speak, at her about. I'm not annoyed. Absolutely nothing about my day was affected by all this. But yeah, moving on. There's probably some other details I missed, but you can find them at other channels. The thing that I'm most interested in discussing, the thing that I want to chat with you today, dear listener, the point of this video is to point out how the lack of easy social justice material to rebuke the death of the coffee shop feminist, and the financial incentives for many content creators in the skeptic community to continue pursuing YouTube. A lot of people quit their day jobs over this. And the continuing introduction of human biodiversity and various white identitarian subjects, although I should correct myself, human biodiversity and white identitarianism. There's a relation there, but they're not equatable. They're different subjects entirely. One's a science, and the other is a political or philosophical position. So what this continued introduction of human biodiversity and its relevance and importance to politics and culture are going to lead to a new front in the culture war opening up, which I would tentatively call the Culture War Round 2. The various groups that have more or less worked together in cooperation with each other to resist the far leftists and the social justice tide will gradually start to break down, which you are seeing now. In the end, there weren't really nearly enough agreements for them to form a long-lasting, cohesive movement with. Remember when people used to talk about how the new cultural libertarian movement was forming? And, it was around for a little while, and I think it'll still be around for a bit. It's not going to go away overnight. But this recent divide, it's gonna, and just how uncomfortable human biodiversity remains for many, many people to discuss on the political side of YouTube. Interest in critiquing the arguments of white identitarians and the alt-right more broadly will only increase in the next few years. I have two predictions to offer you, dear listener. My first is that the skeptic community will not do well during the first few rounds, for lack of a better term, against the alt-right. And this isn't strictly a dialectic argument or dissecting, the objective claims of both sides. This is more just about, strategy and where I think, each side has its strengths here. And in these first opening rounds, it's clearly, I think, definitively going to be on the alt-right, to the alt-right's advantage. First, as I take a sip of water. First, a significant, though by no means the majority, but a significant nonetheless, portion of the skeptic YouTubers fan base is sympathetic or even part of the alt-right themselves, who've, been watching them for years, maybe even started watching them when they were more classically liberal and then became alt-right later on, and have continued watching them and maybe even donated to them and possibly even paying their bills through Patreon. They're going to be a bit annoyed to see that their ideology or that their camp is sort of put under or having more criticism thrown their way, and they'll likely stop watching and donating to these channels. On the other hand, the size of the alt-right channels are comparatively much smaller. I'm pretty sure the biggest of them, pretty sure it's Red Ice Radio, which I believe only has 120,000 subscribers. I mean, I say only when I have like 56 right now. So it's a nice amount, don't get me wrong, but in the grand scheme of YouTube, 120,000 isn't that huge. And being exposed to a larger audience of the skeptic community will help grow the size of their influence. Some of the former fans of the skeptic side will either feel pressured to choose a side once the skeptic community throws the glove on the proverbial floor. And secondly, a second reason why I think the alt-right would do well in the first few rounds of this upcoming next tide of the culture war is that the alt-right has practiced a far more rigorous intellectual process than social justice warriors. They have been on the receiving end of verbal abuse, lies, and slander about their beliefs and their positions for years. And in the free market of ideas, my listener, bias against your positions can have a very hardening effect on how aligned you are with the truth. If everyone is presuming that you're a terrible person, that you're, a white supremacist, a scary white nationalist. Um, you know, when people have that kind of strong bias running against you, it forces you to think very critically about everything you say and be very thorough about everything that you believe. Uh, since it just forces you to be more cogent, more thoughtful, and more intellectually thorough. Now, classical liberals have had a similar experience after far leftists started turning on them, to be fair. Like, it definitely is true that they've had it. But it simply was not to the same extent as the alt-right people have undergone. Simply put, the alt-right is far more prepared for debate, having heard the arguments of classical liberals advocating for racial blindness and the suppression of racial identity for years. They know what they're going to say, and they have arguments backed up. And the skeptics generally have not. I don't want to name any names, but a lot of the responses that Rage was getting um, were poor, in my opinion. They weren't very good. And it just showed that they were not either comfortable talking about this or they just weren't ready to really engage with the data. And to be clear, I'm not on the alt-right. I don't consider myself an alt-rightist. If you're curious, I consider myself a race realist, but not an identitarian. And that's a topic for a different video. But I just want to point that out because I talk about human biodiversity, fairly often. Not because it's particularly the point of this channel or why I, keep uploading videos to it sporadically, but because it's important and it's on my mind a lot, and this is my little outlet in the world where I get to just fuck it and say whatever I feel. So yeah, the skeptics, they're not going to be able to take the Worski-esque approach. Well, I just said not to name any names, but I guess I kind of hinted at it right there. Yeah, they're not. Look, they're not going to be able to do the Worski-esque approach of simply mocking their opponent because their opponent is just an obvious walking parody, which is only new or relatively newer to when the skeptic resistance to social justice first started forming. If you go back and kind of look at a lot of Teal Deer videos, for instance, he's kind of the big one that people point to. People were much more thorough when they were sort of taking feminist or taking social justice academia and debunking papers, pointing out their terrible methodology, etc., etc. They don't do that anymore, and it's not. I'm not pointing a finger and saying, oh, they're all just fucking lazy. It's because it's self-evident. It's anyone who's been following this that social justice is bad and social justice is wrong. It has fallacious um, positions or fallacious what's the word I'm thinking of? Starting positions. It's just wrong at the core. It does they don't understand how human beings work. So, and eventually you're just going to get tired of having to explain that to them. So yeah, moving on. So yeah, that was my first prediction. They're not going to do too well. My second prediction is that the current quasi-egalitarian racial blindness positions of classical liberals and right-wing liberals, aka conservatives, is going to change either by their own individual re-examining of data and self-reflection, or simply by public pressure as they as they lose the first few rounds of the potential culture war of the debate, so to speak. Because the genie is now firmly out of the bottle, and I don't think it'll ever go back now. What people have been predicting for years has come to pass. It's the train's already left the station. That constantly attacking and haranguing white men for the world's problems by holding the white man responsible for the performances and successes of other groups' cultures has undermined the attempt to encourage integration. You know, you can't have fair integration when one group of people is responsible, for the successes and failures of everybody else. It's taught lots of young white people how to be identitarians. They are now of the mindset, and rightfully so, rightfully so. You can't take that away from them, at least not yet. That they are under attack by many different institutions of authority. White people were the only group en masse practicing racial blindness, and their continued practice of this policy of ethics was what was keeping the whole boat floating. It's what was keeping the wheel spinning. Even if they were to keep practicing that at the current rate, as they become a smaller proportion of the demographics of not just America, but also of other Western countries, it's, lacking the numbers. They're just not going to be able to have the same kind of soft cultural influence that they used to have. That's gone now, or it's going. It's on its way out. There's no coming back. Everyone who told you, everyone who tried to say that, getting everyone hyped up on their identity is just going to lead to a backlash, they were totally right. Totally right. Like I said, I'm not a white identitarian myself, but there's no denying that white people's interests and their identities will continue to be a factor for internet discussions, and possibly even eventually mainstream American discussions. So yeah, I think that since SJWs are no longer cool to crack on, at least for most people, I imagine there's still people who, think disagreeing with a woman is sexist. I mean, there's always some people. Some people are just late to the party, ladies and gentlemen. Some people just are not hip. They just don't follow the trends. They just don't stay mindful of what other people are saying, and they just wait till everyone else has already had the argument and the blood, sweat, and tears have already been fought and tried, and then they hop on and they probably claim they were there all along. But if I had one piece of advice for classical liberals, it's this. Even if someone is a genuine Nazi, stop using that as an argument. You're a Nazi is not an argument. If a Nazi told you that it was raining outside, and you looked outside, and it was, indeed, raining outside, guess what? The Nazi was right. You can be a Nazi and still be correct about something. I'm not saying it's okay to be a Nazi for you brain-dead fucking retards listening, and I'm sure there's going to be a few. There's always a few. But I'm sorry, Nazis can still be right, despite how much it might make you uncomfortable. Learn from your experience dealing with the far leftists. It's not fun, nor fair, nor reasonable, nor respectable to have your arguments and your positions ignored because someone called you a name. You just possibly spent years trying to wrestle back control of the political left from SJWs. Don't become them. And my God, I'm telling you folks, this is going to be an issue for a lot of classical liberals. Because I've always wondered, do they realize that slandering people is not okay? Or are they just mad that they, the good, moral, upstanding, egalitarian folks, they're the ones who are getting slandered as hateful bigots when they're not? And that's why they're upset about it. Do they actually understand that it's not okay to call people names? I'm not so sure, everyone. I'm not so sure. I'm not very convinced. And we're going to see if it goes that way. So yeah, guys, classical liberals, if you're listening, stick to the data and stick to reason. Stop, just leave the name calling away. Nobody's taking you seriously. Racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever, it's dead. It's dead. It's not coming back. Not for a generation or two, maybe. And why should it? It's what got us in this predicament in the first place. Don't call people names. Have an argument. And if you're wrong, then admit you were wrong. There's nothing wrong with being incorrect. Being incorrect is a beautiful thing. It means you're right the next time. It makes you closer to the truth. But yeah, I think that I'll leave that there. And some more things I probably could have gone into, but so if you couldn't tell by this video, it was a bit scripted. I kind of wrote it out, scripted parts, to kind of write all my thoughts down. Usually I just have a few notes and go from there. But it's probably obvious where it was scripted and where it wasn't. If you like the more scripted stuff, I'd appreciate you leave a comment, leave a like. Let me know what you think. And I'll try to do more. I like doing the scripted videos, I think, a bit more than the kind of ranty videos. Well, I like them both. But yeah, if you thought this was an interesting video, thought I had something interesting to say, leave a like, share it with a friend. Peace out, everyone.